She was 13. One stage, one microphone, and a world that wasn't ready for her. In 90 seconds, Courtney Hadwin would do what no one thought possible. She would silence the judges, stun Simon Cowell, and ignite a viral moment watched by over 500 million people. But how does a young girl's voice pierce through the cynicism of an industry built on crushing dreams? And at what cost does fame arrive when the world refuses to look away? This isn't just a story about talent. It's about struggle, heartbreak, and the price of being seen too soon. It's about the moment the applause fades and the real story begins. The audition that stopped the world. The year was 2018. America's Got Talent. The stage was enormous. The kind of stage designed to make ordinary people feel impossibly small. Lights blazing down from every angle. Cameras capturing every twitch, every blink, every sign of weakness. Millions of viewers watching live, and millions more waiting to tear apart anyone who dared to fail. This was the arena where dreams came to either explode into reality or die in public humiliation. And standing dead center in all of that chaos was a 13-year-old girl from England who looked absolutely terrified. When Courtney Hadwin introduced herself, her voice was barely a whisper. She could not make eye contact with the judges. Her hands fidgeted nervously at her sides. She looked like someone who wanted to disappear into the floor. The judges exchanged knowing glances, the kind they always exchange when they think they know exactly what they are about to see. Another shy kid, another dreamer who would crumble under the pressure. Another forgettable audition in an endless parade of forgettable auditions. Simon Cowell, the man who had seen every type of performer imaginable over decades in this industry, was probably already mentally moving on to the next act. Nobody in that room had any idea what was about to happen. The opening riff of Otis Redding's Hard to Handle cut through the arena, and in that instant, in that single heartbeat between silence and sound, everything changed. The shy girl vanished. What emerged in her place was something nobody could have predicted. Something primal. Something possessed. Her body erupted into motion, wild and electric, moving with a frenetic energy that seemed channeled from another era entirely. And her voice. That voice, raspy and raw and absolutely massive. This was not a performance. This was a transformation so complete, so visceral, that it seemed almost supernatural. 1 second, there was a nervous child on stage. The next second, there was a powerhouse, channeling decades of soul and blues and rock and roll swagger into 90 seconds of pure musical possession. The judges sat frozen, mouths hanging open, unable to process what they were witnessing. The audience went from polite silence to absolute chaos. People were on their feet, screaming, crying, losing their minds over what was happening in front of them. Howie Mandel did not wait. He did not deliberate. He did not look to his fellow judges for consensus. His hand slammed down on the golden buzzer, and the arena exploded into golden confetti. It fell like a coronation from the heavens, swirling around this tiny girl who moments ago had been too shy to speak above a whisper. Backstage, her family collapsed into each other, sobbing. On stage, Courtney stood frozen in shock, tears streaming down her face, completely overwhelmed by what had just happened to her life. Simon Cowell, the man famous for his sharp tongue and impossible standards, sat completely speechless. He had just witnessed something rare, something that does not come along more than once or twice in a career spent discovering talent. He knew immediately that this was different. This girl was different. What he did not know, what none of them could possibly know, was that this golden moment was just the beginning of a story that would eventually leave him in tears. The price of going viral. The video of that audition spread across the internet like wildfire. Within days, it had millions of views. Within weeks, it had hundreds of millions. Courtney Hadwin became a name that everyone suddenly knew. Headlines everywhere. Interview requests piling up. Record labels circling. The machine of fame had found its newest obsession, and it was hungry. But here is what those viral videos never show you. They never show you what happens after the confetti settles. They never show you the whiplash of going from complete anonymity to global recognition overnight. They never show you what it does to a person, especially a young person, when the entire world suddenly decides they belong to everyone. Courtney's life transformed at a pace that would be disorienting for a seasoned adult, let alone a teenager. Suddenly, there were obligations she had never imagined. Schedules packed from morning until night. People telling her where to be, what to wear, how to smile, what to say. The music industry did not quite know what to do with her because she did not fit into any convenient category. She was not polished pop. She was not mainstream dance music. She was raw and bluesy and emotionally honest in a way that made executives nervous because they could not figure out how to package it. Some voices in the industry started suggesting changes. Tone down the growl, soften the edge, choose safer songs that radio stations would actually play. Pick an image that was easier to market. What these people failed to understand was that her voice was her identity. The rawness was not a flaw to be fixed. It was the entire point. And Courtney, even at that young age, refused to let them strip away the very thing that had made her special. In 2019, she released The Cover Sessions, showcasing her incredible vocal ability through renditions of classic songs. Critics praised it. Fans loved it. That same year, she returned for AGT, The Champions, reigniting global interest. On the surface, everything looked perfect. The trajectory seemed unstoppable. But beneath the success, a quiet war was being waged. The industry wanted the golden buzzer girl frozen in time, that wild-haired teenager channeling Janis Joplin forever. But Courtney was growing, evolving, wanting to write her own songs and tell her own stories, and be seen as a complete artist rather than a nostalgia act trapped in a moment. Social media became both a blessing and a curse. For every message of love and support, there was a critic ready to tear her apart. She was too much for some people, not enough for others, and through all of it, she was still just a kid trying to figure out who she was while the entire world watched and judged every move she made. When everything started breaking, by early 2020, the cracks were becoming impossible to hide. Her schedule was packed with the kind of opportunities most artists spend their entire careers dreaming about. Studio sessions with major producers, back-to-back interviews, live performances spanning continents, magazine covers, television appearances, endless photo shoots where she had to smile on command, no matter how exhausted she felt inside. On paper, she was living the dream. Off paper, she was falling apart. Sleep became something she could rarely afford. Days bled into nights without distinction. Weeks blurred into an endless stream of obligations and expectations. There was always another flight to catch, always another performance to prepare for, always another interview where she had to be bright and charming and grateful even when she felt like she was drowning. The voice that had once been her sanctuary, her source of joy and self-expression, started to feel like something she owed to everyone else. A debt she could never fully repay no matter how much of herself she gave. She started experiencing anxiety before performances, not the normal nerves that sharpen focus, but something darker and heavier. Her hands would shake, her throat would tighten, Her mind would race with fears about failing, about disappointing everyone who believed in her, about being exposed as somehow less than what that golden buzzer moment had promised. The loneliness was suffocating. She was surrounded by people constantly, but had never felt more isolated. The managers and publicists and handlers seemed more interested in the brand than the person behind it. Every decision felt strategic rather than compassionate. She smiled for cameras while watching herself fade in mirrors. Then the pandemic arrived and the world stopped. For most of the entertainment industry, it was a disaster. But for Courtney, it was something unexpected. Relief. For the first time in years, there were no stages demanding her presence, no schedules controlling her every hour, no expectations crushing her from every direction, just silence. And in that silence, she finally had space to breathe. She picked up her guitar because she wanted to, not because someone had scheduled it. She wrote songs at 2 in the morning because she felt something real, not because a label needed content. She reconnected with the girl who had once sung in her bedroom simply for the joy of it. The pandemic gave her something she had not experienced since that golden buzzer changed everything. Time to think, time to rest, time to realize how completely exhausted she had become in every possible way. But clarity comes with a price, because once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. Courtney understood finally that she had never been given space to grow up normally. She had been consumed by a machine that moves fast and demands faster, a machine that rarely pauses to ask how anyone is actually feeling. And she knew with terrifying certainty that something had to change, the moment that shook everyone. What happened next sent shockwaves through her fanbase and the entire entertainment world. This is the part of the story I warned you about. This is where everything falls apart. Reports started surfacing that Courtney had been hospitalized. Details were almost non-existent. No official statements, no clarifications, just whispers spreading across social media and entertainment forums. Her accounts, usually active with updates and fan interactions, went completely dark. No posts, no stories, no reassurance that she was okay. Just silence. And in that silence, worry transformed into genuine fear. Nobody knew what had happened. Some sources suggested exhaustion had finally caught up with her, that years of relentless pressure had caused her to collapse. Others whispered about the emotional toll becoming too heavy to carry. The rumors grew darker and more frightening as hours passed without any word. The girl who had seemed invincible on that stage, who had commanded an arena with nothing but her voice, was suddenly terrifyingly human, fragile, possibly broken. Her fans were devastated. Social media flooded with concern and prayers and desperate pleas for information. The entertainment industry was forced to confront something it usually ignores: that the young talents we celebrate, the prodigies we put on pedestals and demand perfection from, are still just people, still vulnerable, still capable of shattering under pressure we can barely imagine. And then came the moment that nobody expected, the moment that proved even the hardest hearts can break. Simon Cowell appeared on a live broadcast. What was supposed to be a routine segment about talent shows became something entirely different. When the conversation turned to Courtney, his entire demeanor shifted. The confidence disappeared. The sharp wit vanished. His voice, always so steady and commanding, began to waver in a way nobody had ever witnessed from him. And then, in front of millions of viewers, Simon Cowell broke down. Tears filled his eyes as he spoke about watching Courtney grow, about recognizing something in her that he had rarely encountered in decades of discovering talent. "I've watched her grow," he managed to say, his voice cracking. She had something I don't think I've ever seen before. He had to stop. You could see him fighting for composure, losing that battle, and finally surrendering to the emotion. And to see her going through this, he continued through tears. It's just heartbreaking. This is so tragic. This was not television performance. This was not calculated for ratings. This was Simon Cowell, the man who built an empire on being unshakable, sitting there wiping tears from his eyes because he genuinely cared about this girl. He said the most important thing was her well-being, her health, her recovery. Not her career, not her commercial potential. Her, the person behind the voice. She's more than a performer, he said. She's someone with a light inside her, and that light deserves to shine again. The moment went viral immediately. Millions watched the clip. Fans flooded social media with support for Courtney and newfound respect for Simon. Beneath all his armor and sharp criticism was a man who truly cared about the people he had helped discover. It changed how many viewed him forever, and it made everyone realize just how serious Courtney's situation had become. The road to recovery. In the months that followed, the focus shifted entirely away from career momentum and towards something far more important: her health, her recovery, her survival as a human being, rather than a product. For the first time in years, she was given what she needed most: privacy, space, permission to simply exist without performing. She continued writing music privately, using songwriting as therapy to process everything she had experienced. The songs that emerged were different from anything before, more reflective, more honest, marked by the kind of depth that only comes from walking through darkness and finding your way back. Simon Cowell reportedly stayed in contact throughout this period, not as a producer looking for his next project, not as a judge evaluating potential, but as a mentor who genuinely wanted to see her okay. His messages were consistent and gentle. Take your time. The world can wait. Slowly, Courtney began rebuilding. Her circle grew smaller, but infinitely stronger. The people around her now were not handlers trying to capitalize on her talent. They were believers who saw the spark in her, not because of fame, but because of who she truly was. They gave her quiet confidence to eventually return to the studio on her own terms. Not to recreate past magic, but to forge something entirely new and authentic. Who is Courtney Hadwin? Now let me tell you who this remarkable person actually is, because understanding where she came from makes everything you just witnessed even more extraordinary. This is the part of the story that breaks my heart every time I think about it. Courtney Hadwin was born in Hartlepool, a small coastal town in northeast England, where life moves with the rhythm of tides rather than headlines. It is the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where generations of families have lived and worked and dreamed small dreams, where extraordinary things rarely happen, where aspirations of global stardom seem as distant as the moon. She grew up in a modest home on an ordinary street, surrounded by ordinary people living ordinary lives. Nothing about her childhood suggested the extraordinary things waiting ahead. Nothing indicated that this quiet corner of England was incubating one of the most remarkable young voices of a generation. As a young girl, Courtney was not the type to demand attention. In fact, she seemed to actively avoid it. Teachers consistently described her as shy and reserved, the kind of student who sits in the back and hopes nobody calls on her. Classmates probably overlooked her entirely, never suspecting that the quiet girl, who rarely spoke above a whisper, contained multitudes they could not imagine. She was introverted in a world that rewards extroverts, soft-spoken in spaces that celebrate loudness, different in ways that made fitting in feel impossible. If you had passed her in a school hallway, you would not have looked twice. There was nothing in her outward presentation suggesting anything remarkable existed beneath the surface. She seemed destined for a quiet life in a quiet town, and nobody would have thought twice about it. But behind closed doors, something entirely different emerged. Something almost magical. Her father had filled their home with music from the moment she was born. Etta James spinning on vinyl, filling rooms with aching blues. Janis Joplin crackling through worn speakers with that unmistakable raspy wail. James Brown's electric energy pulsing through walls, making everything feel alive. Her mother's voice often mingled with those records, creating a constant soundtrack woven through every memory of childhood. While other kids her age followed pop charts and memorized lyrics to whatever was trending, Courtney was studying the masters, absorbing every note like someone starving for nourishment, feeling every crack in voices that sang of heartbreak and liberation and the full spectrum of human experience. Understanding somehow, even before she had the words to explain it, that music was more than entertainment. It was a language for emotions too big and too complicated to speak out loud. When she put on headphones and stood before her bedroom mirror, something supernatural seemed to happen. A transformation so complete it defied explanation. The shy girl who could not make eye contact with strangers simply disappeared. In her place emerged someone raw and powerful, and completely alive, channeling the spirits of legends she had absorbed since before she could walk. She did not copy songs. She claimed them as her own, made them hers. Her voice, raspy and soulful beyond anything her years should have allowed, carried the weight of emotions most adults struggle their entire lives to express. She would emerge from these private sessions almost disoriented, like someone waking from a vivid dream, unsure how much time had passed or how completely she had lost herself in the music. Her parents watched this transformation happen again and again, and knew without question that their daughter possessed something extraordinary, something that could not be taught or manufactured, something that seemed to come from somewhere beyond normal explanation. They just could not have imagined how dramatically that gift would reshape all their lives, how it would lift their daughter to heights beyond anything they had dreamed, while simultaneously exposing her to pressures no teenager should ever have to face. Music became her outlet for everything she could not say out loud, her escape from a world that felt too overwhelming for someone wired the way she was wired, her connection to something larger than ordinary life. Every song she learned became part of her soul. Every artist she studied added another layer to the voice that would eventually make the world stop and stare. She was building towards something massive without even knowing it. A small-town girl with impossible talent, waiting quietly in her bedroom for the moment when the universe would finally be ready to listen. Where she stands today. Today, Courtney Hadwin is no longer just the girl who earned the golden buzzer on America's Got Talent. She has become something far more important, a symbol of what happens when we put impossible pressure on young talents, a reminder that the brightest stars are still human beings who can struggle and break and need support. A young woman who faced the darkest consequences of overnight fame and somehow found her way back toward the light. Reports suggest new music is coming. Music that reflects her growth and her struggles and her survival. Whether she returns to mainstream spotlight or chooses a quieter, independent path remains to be seen. But what is certain is that her story has changed conversations about how the entertainment industry treats young artists. Her journey forced millions of people to think differently about fame and its costs. But the story doesn't end here. Fame is fleeting, and the spotlight always moves on. But the choices, the risks, the courage to step away, those leaves echoes that last far longer than applause. What will Courtney's next move be? When the world stops watching, will she reclaim her voice on her own terms? Or will the industry's shadows pull her back in? The answers aren't easy. They don't come with guarantees. And that's exactly what makes her journey so compelling. Keep watching, because the next chapter, whenever it comes, will challenge everything we think we know about talent, ambition, and the cost of being seen.